Hey up YouTube! Today we're going to be taking a look at the MS1672 FPV camera from gsscam.com, or as his friends like to call him and slightly easier to remember, the Mista camera. Just like the SpeedyBee and the Sparrow in the previous videos, this is another Runcam compatible competitor. It's not PAL AndyRC switchable, but both are available and comes in two flavours. A 2.1mm lens for 160 degree field of view and a 2.3mm lens for a slightly less fisheye 140 degree view on the world, which is what I chose along with NTSC. First power up on the bench looks decent, with good colour and sharpness. Here it is at 4.3 as intended, and here it is as I'll be flying it 4.3 stretched across 16.9. Outside with some sunlight the colour immediately pops, and perhaps a little oversaturated, but nothing that can't be adjusted with a couple of clicks in the OSD or even the goggles menu. Just like the others, it's way over sharpened and needs to be turned down in my opinion. It's flyable out the box, but the white track markers are far easier to see in the dappled light spots if it is turned down. After 3 or 4 more packs I warmed to it a little and had no problems flying at all. The contrast on everything that I needed to see was decent. It does blow out the highlights though, certainly a bit more than the SpeedyBee. And if they're really bright, it tend to wrap round the tree rather than create a silhouette. At this point, over the next half a dozen flights, I experimented with all the different exposure settings, but I got absolutely nowhere. The stock setting was as good as it got for me. As expected, the Runcam default of 26 out of 30 was set for sharpening, so I lowered that to about 10, which seemed like a good balance in my eyes. And flying around with it, I could tell it's just a hair off the sharpness the SpeedyBee provides, but far superior to a basic all-in-one setup. At this point I started to doubt my assumption that the Mista was performing worse than the SpeedyBee, and the lap times were getting faster and I was hitting less air gates. One thing for sure was the fact that I could see textures clearer with less sharpening. But perhaps the background being whited out more was helping me focus on the foreground. Either way, it was time to see how the Mista handled the car park, where its light handling and contrast stability in particular would hopefully be more apparent. And it was, very much so. Highlights from the lights on the wall blew out easily, and especially the sun in the background quickly showed the limitations of digital wide dynamic range. But yet again, this has zero impact on my ability to actually hit air gates, and yet again, I managed to fly increasingly faster laps throughout this session, as everything I needed to fly through or around was exposed really well. Colour didn't look as oversaturated like it did in the forest here either. Here's a couple of laps of the less messy quick runs for you to decide if this is an issue for you. Now these are from different sessions. I'll also put up some SpeedyBee and some Sparrow footage for you to compare. I'll let you decide if this is an issue for you or not.
On a mountain, it's not of gold, but of shit to the bloody.
At this point I was about to call it good. Any differences between the two were pretty clear and no issue at all in real world use. Then I flew them all in extreme sunshine where they were required to switch contrast quickly and back, and the difference was much more pronounced. First was that same wooded spot with air gates, and the glaring sun shot through the trees at just the right angle at various spots. Sometimes multiple times a second, and this does make it harder to fly than the others in this case. It simply gives you less time to react. On a straight after a turn wasn't so bad, but adding multiple gaps or gates to the mix and it's a different story. I didn't get a chance to try this exact spot and lighting with the SpeedyBee, as it was so windy even the guys with 5-inch prop quads were having a hard time. We only stayed for about 3 flights, but like the Runcam it does remain flyable in similar conditions. It does seem like the shorter and harsher the light is, the less well it reacts to it. Large amounts of sun and, again, there's not a massive problem. Tiny little flickers as you go past the gaps in the trees and the sun's just at the wrong angle can cripple it fairly badly. So let's have a look at how long it does take to adjust from light to dark and back again. Here's some flow and sun for reference on the hottest day of the year so far and as bright as it ever gets in the UK, coming in and going out of frame. And here's what it looks like when asked to do it a little quicker. From light to dark really isn't that bad at all, it's very respectable. But dark to light, when those blown highlights grow to become the entire image, can be much longer. Foreground is around half a second or so, but the sun takes almost 2 entire seconds to revert back to a stable exposure. If you know the spot or you're going slow, it may not be an issue, but if you don't or you're flying faster, it will absolutely slow you down or make you miss branches in your path. You do get used to it, but flying the Mista back to back with the SpeedyBee, the difference is pretty vivid. If we duplicate those forest conditions with the sunlight flickering past objects, it's clear the Mista just can't react fast enough. Mixing this flickering with some windows and the fact that the sun slowly moves around in the sky, it makes it much less predictable as to which effect will be produced. A few more examples of that here, followed by some side by side with the SpeedyBee. The last thing I'd like to mention is the build quality. Both have taken some serious crashes and kept on working without issues. Even though the Mista doesn't have any goop holding the components on, no issues there. However, the Mista is an all plastic case, and there's no metal threaded inserts where the mounting screws go. When I first fitted it to my Jet 110 with the self-tapping screws provided, they initially gripped okay, but tightening them enough to stop it from moving freely stripped the newly made threads. There's no actual threads in there, just bare plastic. Luckily, the Jet has so much room inside that I could simply use the upper or lower holes from the 3 provided to mount it. The second time I just used normal M2 stainless Allen head bolts, but long enough, and pushed down firmly with the driver to bite into the plastic and make those threads. Thankfully, after this was done, it could be cinched up super tight, and it didn't move in any of the crashes that I had. But all that could be avoided if threaded metal inserts were used, as per the SpeedyBee and the Sparrow cams. All in all, the Mista's a great camera, and I have no problem using it inside car parks. Probably had some of the fastest laps I've had yet with the Jet 110. But give it some tougher conditions, and the SpeedyBee does leave it behind. So I hope that's been useful to you. That's all for this one. See you in the next.